Once you say those words to your spouse, hey, I want to be separated, I want a divorce, you can't take that back. Those are very big words. It's important to really mean it before you say it.
Think divorce is just paperwork? Think again. It's a full-blown war.
Divorce can be absolutely all-consuming and overwhelming. Your life as you knew it is being turned completely upside down. You are going to feel crazy, and you are going to feel anxious, and you are going to spin, and you are going to have trouble making good decisions, and that is to be expected.
Custody battles, hidden finances, legal traps at every turn. And if you're not prepared, you'll get eaten alive.
How you initiate the separation can actually set the tone for the whole divorce process.
Today, we sit down with Jamie Davis, a lawyer who's been in the trenches of the ugliest divorces. And she's here to arm you with the survival skills you'll need to fight back and win.
Have you ever wondered what masculinity even is in the modern era? Are you ready to move beyond the macho bully or the soy boy archetypes? I'm Marc Azoulay, and this is the Men's Therapy Podcast. Together, we'll explore how neuroscience, Jungian psychology, and Buddhist philosophy can transform your life, your marriage, and your business. Are you ready to deep dive into the minds of men? Let's begin. Hello, and welcome back to the Men's Therapy Podcast. I'm your host, Marc Azoulay, and I'm here with Jamie Davis. She's a lawyer that specializes in family law and divorce. She's written a book and hosts a podcast called A Year and a Day, Divorce Without Destruction. Jamie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited to talk to you. We were chatting a little before, as we've talked to a ton of different therapists and mental health professionals about divorce, but not enough lawyers. So I'm really excited to hear it from your side and to get your perspective on what is going on out there with men. You know, divorce seems like it just continues to climb over and over and over again.
Yeah, we are seeing that. I mean, the trend is fairly, steady in terms of the percentage of folks that are getting divorced. So I am happy to share what I know with you all and your listeners.
Yeah, so I always like to start with a personal story, like what got you into practicing family law and specializing in divorce, and specifically like non-destructive divorce?
Yeah, so when I was in law school, I took one family law class my second year and absolutely fell in love with the subject matter. When I first started law school, I thought I was going to find my way to criminal law, but that wasn't the case. I really liked family law. I liked the idea of helping folks through this difficult transition time in their lives. And so I took every other family law class that Carolina had to offer. And I've been practicing family law actually with the same firm ever since I graduated back in 2001.
Nice. So I imagine you've seen a ton of different cases. Do you have a sense of how many cases you've worked on?
I would say hundreds, if not over 1,000, probably in the almost, 24 years this year it'll be I've been doing this.
Yeah, that makes you an expert. you know what you're talking about. So I'm curious, right? Like, what leads to divorce? Because I have a skewed perspective, right? Because I see the guys that end up coming to therapy, right after a divorce or when they're considering a divorce. So from my vantage point, I see a lot of like substance use. I see a lot of infidelity. I see a lot of built up resentment. But for the average person, like, is that as common as I think it is, or is it other things that cause divorce?
So I think the infidelity is more a symptom of a bad marriage rather than the cause. I think folks get divorced for a lot of different reasons, but usually I think it boils down to, differences in communication or folks drift apart. Or of course, sometimes there can be some untreated mental health issues going on. And I think a lot of those times, that's where you see the substance use creep in when folks are starting to self-medicate a bit.
Absolutely. Yeah. When they're starting to just like push things down, I see a lot of like nice guy syndrome, and I work mainly with men, so I only have that vantage point, but I see a lot of like, guys that I think are really conflict avoidant. They push everything down. They think that they're being a good husband, but really their wife just wants more. Their wife wants to know what they think and feel about things. And I see a divorce atrophy over time. Have you seen that pattern with the people you've worked with?
Yeah, I think it can happen. I think we see some male clients who like to stick their heads in the sand and pretend like there are no issues when really there are. And one of the first things I recommend to folks who come in and they're on the fence about whether or not they want to separate is I suggest couples counseling, just so they can make sure that, at the end of the day, if they end up separating, that they have tried everything they can try to keep it together.
Yeah, I know you specialize in like amicable divorce. So can you say a little bit about that? Because I think when the average person thinks of divorce, I think of like, long drawn out court battles and custody fights and all these kinds of like real nasty things.
Yeah, so I don't think it's possible to keep every case out of court, right? Like there are some cases that the judge is just going to have to decide for the couple, how things are going to play out. But I do think that there are certain steps that people can take to minimize conflict throughout the divorce process. And a lot of these focus on controlling your own behavior. You can't always control how your spouse is going to react to what you do or say, but you can certainly control your own actions. And so throughout the course of my practice, I've seen time and time again the negative impacts that highly contentious litigation can have on a family. And I've also seen certain themes emerge in cases where the spouses were actually able to resolve things on their own and get it settled outside of court. And so the themes that I've seen in those cases, I've developed this 5-step framework for divorcing without destruction, kind of based upon those themes that I had seen.
Yeah, can you run us through what those 5 steps are?
Yeah, sure. So the very first thing is how you initiate the separation can actually set the tone for the whole divorce process. So I encourage folks, before you ever even broach the topic of separation with your spouse, that you have a plan in place. And I think that you need to be ready in 3 different ways. I think you need to be ready emotionally, you need to be ready legally, and you also need to be ready financially. And what I mean by that, emotionally, again, try the couples counseling if you haven't. See if you guys can keep it together. Perhaps seek out therapy for yourself to help talk through whether or not separation is something that you want to pursue. Legally, I think it's important to, at the very least, have a consultation with an attorney. You don't have to necessarily hire the attorney very early on in the process if you don't want to. But knowledge is power. Have that consultation and at least learn what you might be looking at if you do decide to proceed with separation. And finally, I think it's important to be prepared financially. And what I mean by that is go ahead and start gathering your financial documents, tax returns, bank statements, investment account statements, all of those things. Your lawyer is going to ask you to do that anyway. But go ahead and get a handle on your finances, what's in your marital estate, how much money you're spending each month, what your income is, what your spouse's income, and all of that sort of thing. So that's step 1. Be prepared and be mindful for how you initiate the separation. Once you say those words to your spouse, hey, I want to be separated, I want a divorce, you can't take that back. Those are very big words. And so it's important to really mean it before you say it.
Yeah, I think that's true. And for a lot of people, that is like you said, that point of no return. It's a very devastating thing. That the D word, right? It's like talked about. It's difficult to hold back. And, depending on your spouse, right, male or female, like you don't know how they are going to respond to that. Obviously I've heard horror stories of men getting really angry, storming off, going to the bar in the middle of the night, drinking themselves stupid, right? Like it can be really volatile. So I would definitely add so to figure out safety. If there's a safety plan, if you're going to say it and you think that there's going to be an explosion, make sure you have a place to go if you need to.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's really important to remember too, especially if you're the spouse that's been thinking about separation for a long time. You've had time to process it, think about it, kind of come up with your plan. Once you say it to your spouse, they have it. They're in a completely different spot than you are. And so you got to give them a minute to get up to speed to where you are in the process.
Yeah. Do you have any suggestions about how to do that? Like, is it just a conversation? Do you go to a public place? Do you write something down? Like what have you seen work for the delivery?
So I think it depends on the family and the dynamic between the couple. There's lots of different ways. Folks who are fairly amicable and not volatile, I think they can have that discussion. If they're a little worried about safety, a public place is great. We're trying to have a third party present. Perhaps it is the couples counselor. Maybe you're delivering that message in a session. I know from a therapy standpoint, a lot of counselors don't love that, but sometimes that might be one of the only options. So I think that's one way you can do it. Something else I counsel my clients is that you might feel like you owe your spouse an explanation, or you feel like you really need to tell them in person. You don't have to. You don't owe them that. If you're scared for your safety, or your spouse doesn't listen to you and isn't going to hear you, you can communicate the message in a different way. Sometimes it's a letter. It's not ideal. Sometimes it's delivered from the lawyer to the person to let them know, hey, my client is going to be separating from you. We need to figure out what this is going to look like. But there's lots of different ways that can be accomplished.
Great. Yeah, it's good to know there's different options and figuring out like what works best for you and your family, like you said. So yeah, going on to step 2, what's the next part of the pathway?
Yeah. So as you are, coming up with your plan and discussing separation with your spouse, you're going to want to assemble the team that is going to support you throughout the process. And there are lots of different members of the team. Of course, there's the divorce lawyer. There's typically a therapist or a divorce coach. Oftentimes there can be a financial advisor. Sometimes you need experts to help you value things like business interests or real estate, those types of things. And a really important member of the team, I think, is having a good friend, just somebody that you can talk to about what is going on with your life and your situation.
Yeah, and that's critical. Right? Like, and someone to distract you probably, right? That like, you just go out and have some fun so your whole life doesn't become this, Yeah. Yeah, how do you, and it's kind of like a therapy question too, but do you counsel your people on, how do I say this, like keeping your shit together? Because I've seen it with some people, once that word gets, deployed, right, we're getting a divorce, I've seen people really spiral. They stop showing up to work, they start drinking, they, maybe they have a big fight with their kids and push their kids away. Like, it can be a really devastating thing.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I tell my clients is that, number one, divorce can be absolutely all-consuming and overwhelming. Your life as you knew it is being turned completely upside down. You are going to feel crazy, and you are going to feel anxious, and you are going to spin, and you are going to have trouble making good decisions, and that is to be expected. And so, number one, I advise almost everyone that comes through my office to get a therapist, because they need one, frankly. Again, this is one of the most stressful times of their lives. And second, I always try to get them to focus on that day or the next day. Don't try to look at, what's going to happen at Christmas 10 months from now or whenever. Think about what you need for today, tomorrow. Let's baby step through the process. Otherwise, it can get really overwhelming for folks who are constantly doing the what if analysis. Well, yeah, I could do that, but what about if this happens or if that happens? And so I try to encourage folks to take it day by day and to worry about the, decisions that need to be made sooner rather than trying to focus on the big picture.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he must deal with a lot of intensity. Because imagine, because you're seeing people like at that rock bottom moment in their lives.
Yeah. We always tell folks that we forgive them for the state they originally show up in, because, it's certainly not their fault. But divorce is very stressful, and folks handle that stress in different ways. And so our job is to try to counsel them through the legal aspects of it and try to keep the train on the track as much as we can.
Yeah. Okay. So step 1, right, is like prepare. Step 2, build your team. How about number 3?
So step 3 is getting clear on what is most important to you and being willing to let go of the rest. We also see in divorce cases, it's very common for people to get bogged down in winning every little issue. For example, I've had folks fighting over the wedding china. Okay, well, you guys are getting separated. I can't imagine why either one of you wants the wedding china, but it's certainly not something to hold up a settlement over or to waste your attorney fees fighting over. And so I try to encourage folks to look at least the financial aspects of divorce. Certainly when we're talking about custody of children, it's a whole different ballgame. But when we're talking about dividing property and support, it needs to be a business decision. You need to take the emotion out of it, and you need to make the decision that is going to financially benefit you. I also encourage folks, as part of getting clear on what's important to them, think about the big 3. If you could make it through this divorce with these 3 things, what would it be? And then that can help help you decide, what are the things I'm willing to let go of? Do I really need the personal property? If you have enough money that you can replace it, it's not really worth fighting over at that point.
Yeah. Do you see people I guess how sneaky do people get? Do you see people squirrel away money or try to send money to family members or try to hide finances,
Yeah, sure. I mean, folks do that. Absolutely. Especially if someone owns a business that's mainly a cash business, it's easier for them to do something like that. But I will tell you, in this day and time, it is much harder. There's typically a paper trail. Most funds are electronically deposited into a bank account or an investment account, or if someone is a W-2 employee who gets paychecks, you can see where the check is being deposited. And so it is more difficult. Sometimes folks can try to be a little sneaky and take cash out of ATMs that they squirrel away, or if they are going to somewhere a store where you can get cash back, maybe they ask for a little bit of cash back, and so you don't know where that cash is going. But typically, I will say it is very difficult to hide large sums of money unless it's some very, complex offshore account situation. But I will say that is the exception, not the rule.
Right. Yeah. So involved in money laundering or switch
right. Yeah. Something illegal going on.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a whole nother thing. Yeah. Yeah. And I imagine, you do financial forensics and that kind of thing, trying to track where assets are being held and all that.
So if we think that there is a chance something is hidden or we need to do a little more investigation, there are forensic CPAs that we work with that we can hire who can do that type of analysis for us. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Because I know that's always it's always a concern, or people say that in therapy a lot where they're like, oh, I don't know, what she has. I don't know what she's been hiding. I don't know if she's been stealing from me, right? Especially if they've been very laissez-faire with their books up until the divorce, then there's this huge paranoia spike I see come up for a lot of people of where's the money? What's she going to take? What am I going to be left with? This very panicky anxiety thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think it comes from a place of fear, right? They don't understand the finances. And so they're scared because they've lost that trust that the other spouse is doing something untoward.
Okay. So that's step 3. What's step 4?
So step 4 is staying focused on what's in the best interest of the children. Research shows that children benefit from having both parents involved in their lives, provided both parents are fit and suitable to do that. And so I try to encourage my clients not to get caught up in the roles that were established during the marriage. If one spouse worked and the other spouse stayed home and cared for the children, just because it was not the working spouse's role to care for the children, it doesn't mean they can't do it. It just means that you guys divided the labor in a way such that one of you was responsible for childcare and the other wasn't.
Right. Yeah. So how do you, maybe it's more of a therapy thing, but I'm curious, how do you recommend talking to children about it? So no, that's a huge stress point for most people.
Yeah, so we typically tell folks to reach out to a child psychologist to figure out the best way for their particular children. But, based on what we've seen, it's best not to tell children until there's a concrete plan in place for what you're going to do. You don't want them worrying about anything related to the separation. And so to the extent you can keep the kids out of the middle of the adult issues, that's always best.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you have any recommendations around co-parenting or custody, or if people should move close or far? How do you advise people around that?
So I think it depends on the underlying relationship between the parents, first of all. But logistically, if folks can live relatively close to one another, it is easier to get the kids back and forth to where they need to be, especially as they get older and you're having to shuffle sporting equipment and all of the things, book bags back and forth between the houses. It can make it easier. In terms of communication for co-parenting, I have found that less is often more, meaning that the two of you don't need to be talking about every single thing under the sun, but keep your conversations limited to issues surrounding the children. It's best. Typically, written communication is better, especially for high conflict folks, than trying to talk on the phone or in person. I love BIF. I don't know if you're familiar with Bill Eddy, but he came up with the BIF format for communication for co-parents. It's brief, informative, friendly, and firm. And in the work that I do as a parenting coordinator, I often suggest to my clients that they communicate in that manner.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I know there's also apps, you might know the name specifically, but there's apps that are like moderated by therapists or psychologists. So like if it is really, high conflict, it'll have to get approved before it gets sent to the other person. Do you ever use those with your clients?
I have not used them, but I am aware of them. And actually, I have some cases, again, where I'm a parent coordinator, where I make the parents send me their messages first before they are able to send them to the other parent, so I can edit them for what I call the snark factor.
Yeah, great. So you're doing that yourself. Yeah, because there's all kinds of like passive aggressive or, at best, abusive at worst, right? Things that can go through messaging. So being able to, knock that out is critical, So I'm curious, like around co-parenting, right? Like, yeah, I guess you recommend joint custody or going for full custody. How does that work out?
So at least in North Carolina, where I practice, our judges tend to lean toward a 50-50 custody schedule unless there is some real reason why one parent or the other is not fit and suitable for 50% of the time. And typically that's something pretty big, a severe drug, alcohol addiction, something that is putting the child in harm's way, abuse, things like that. Otherwise, a lot of cases do shake out around a 50-50. And so I try to counsel my clients to keep that in mind. Why are we fighting for primary custody? What is it about your co-parent that you think is not good for your children? And let's talk through whether or not the court is going to agree with you. Because in a lot of cases, it is the very conflict of the custody litigation itself that can be harmful to the kids.
Exactly. Yeah. Being like dragged into court, having to testify, having to pick a parent. I mean, that stuff, they'll come see me 10 years later, that's like kind of childhood trauma that can lead to all kinds of issues down the line.
I mean, I will say the good news is that our courts try to keep the children out of it unless absolutely necessary. Here, judges can listen to the wishes of the children about what they would like to have happen if the kids are of suitable age and discretion, meaning one, they know the difference between the truth and a lie, and also they've got a certain level of maturity that they understand what is going on. But the judges are not required to follow the children's wishes if the child is not necessarily, if his wishes are not aligned with his best interests, let's say. And also, if both sides consent, the judge can actually talk to the child in chamber, so the child is not put on the stand and being forced to testify and feel like they're picking one parent over the other. I do caution my clients, though, against having the children talk to the judge because, let's face it, kids are kids, and you never know what they're going to say at any given time. They may say one thing to you when mom or dad isn't around, but then they may be saying the same thing to the other parent when you're not around. And so you have to be very careful about doing that. And so in most cases, I will say probably over 95% of my cases, the kids don't really play any part at all in terms of speaking to the judge, testifying, and that sort of thing.
If you're enjoying the podcast so far, please hit the subscribe button and leave us a review. The feedback helps us to reach more men and inspire them to become the best versions of themselves. Thank you for your support. Now back to the show.
Yeah, I imagine that's wise. Yeah, because they're very fickle, and they could have had like a good ice cream last night. Now they just like love dad, and it can their opinions can move pretty crazily. I'm curious in the event of like, a divorce where again I work usually with men, so where the guy did something bad, right? There's infidelity on his part. There's alcoholism, right? There's stuff where like he is in the wrong. What are some things that he can do to try to preserve custody? Because again, that's a thing I hear a lot with my clients where they're afraid that they're not going to be able to see their kid because, there is something they have to work on in their life. They might not be the safest person, or they might have an anger management issue. What can they do to try to get a leg up and still be able to get to see their children?
Yeah, that is a great question. So our courts do not fault people for getting help with issues that they may have. So if a person has an alcohol issue, if they get treatment for that, that's a good thing. Whatever they can do to make themselves a safe, better parent, that's what they should do. Maybe they need to take a parenting class, or maybe they need an anger management class. Infidelity, while very harmful to a marriage in most cases doesn't really have a big impact on the kids from a custody standpoint, unless the kids were somehow dragged into the middle of it. Like, for example, let's say dad was introducing the children to his affair partner before he and mom even separated, right? That's bad. Don't do that. But in most cases, the kids may not even know about the affair. And so I tell folks, don't beat yourself up over that. Mistakes happen. Again, just because you were a bad husband doesn't mean you were a bad dad. And so in a lot of cases, it really does not impact custody that much. But for the other issues, if you know that you have a problem with something, the best thing to do is to get the help you need to address that problem.
Yeah, that's great. I just want to highlight that, because I think a lot of guys are afraid that they do get treatment. They're admitting that they have a problem that'll hurt them in court, versus what I'm hearing you say, taking accountability is better,
Yeah, and even in cases where maybe the dad has an active alcohol issue, there are certain safety provisions that can be put into the court order to help maintain his relationship with the kids while he's getting the help that he needs. Like, for example, we have lots of cases where there's a SoberLink device and the person has to basically take a breathalyzer before and after the visitation to make sure that during the time they had the children, they were sober and capable of caring for them. So there are certain things that can be put in place. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to lose all of your time with your kids, provided you're willing to jump through the hoops in the short term until everybody is satisfied that you have done what you need to do and that the thing is no longer an issue.
Yeah, I've seen that. It's like the interlock system in the car, right? If you're driving the kids around, you got to be sober. I've seen guys preemptively do voluntary drug tests just to prove that they could quit, and prove that they are sober, even if there is a big alcohol incident or something. So yeah, I think there's a lot of ways to build, a body of evidence to be look, I have this under control. I'm dealing with this. I'm taking accountability.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So what's your final step?
All right. So step 5, prioritizing your emotional well-being and practicing self-care. I know sometimes this is not as easy for men as it is for women, but you need to make sure that you're healthy so that you can get through the process. So as a lawyer, there are some decisions I can make for my client and some that I can't. And so, for example, I can't tell a client whether or not they are willing to accept a certain settlement offer. I can't tell them what custody schedule is in the best interest of their particular children. And so I need my clients to be in a healthy place so that they can help me help them to make these decisions that are going to affect them for the rest of their lives. Self-care, as you know, can be anything, right? It's whatever makes you feel better. Maybe it's exercising. Maybe it's eating healthy. Maybe it's going to therapy. Maybe it's taking medication if you need it. For some folks, it's hanging out with their friends and being around people. But whatever it is that helps you get grounded and helps take your mind off the stress of the divorce, you really need that when you're going through this process, or you will make yourself crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just add to that. I think when you get crazy, you might do something or say something that's rash that could compromise the process, because it feels like it can be pretty fragile when you're in it. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, the last thing you want to do when you are involved in a custody case is to resort to self-medication. I mean, it's the drinking and the drugs that are going to get you in trouble with the court, where if you will just get the other help that you need, again, it could be exercising, right? It might be a small change that you need to make. That's going to serve you well.
Yeah, absolutely. We talk about the custody battles. How often do you see them drag out? Where it's there's always this constant push-pull, this battle, coming back to the court 2 years, 3 years later.
So thankfully, I think that those are getting to be fewer and farther between. I think parenting coordinators are helping with that a little bit. For folks that don't know what that is, a parenting coordinator is a person who can be appointed by the court, typically a lawyer or a therapist, and their job is to help the parents make decisions about certain major issues for the kids when the parents don't agree. And the parent coordinator can also help with communication between the parties and things like that. So parenting coordinators can be good at helping reduce conflict. But I will say, there are still those cases, and typically one side or the other has an untreated mental health issue. And those cases, usually do end up in court and can potentially go on for years until the child turns 18.
Yeah, and those are probably more of the ones that I see, where there is that just constant push-pull or that battle, and I can just see it like really rip families apart, And you do that parent coordinating work, right? Yeah. Did you start getting, when did you get into that?
I have been a parent coordinator since, I believe, 2008.
Okay. So what do you see as some of the common conflict areas around parenting?
Oh, there's so many. Folks disagree about education a lot, school choice for the kids. Extracurriculars is a big one, especially if a kid plays a travel sport or, some other activity that has a huge time commitment. Communication, a lot of times one parent may communicate too much, or the communication can be aggressive or abusive, and so you need to put some parameters in place for that. Some cases where one parent likes to take the child to the doctor or the therapist or wherever and not tell the other parent, that can be a big issue. Changing medical providers without checking in with mom or dad, also an issue. Really, just about any decision that can be made for a child when it comes to, big things like education, medical, extracurriculars, we see those a lot.
Yeah. And how do you play a role in that? Are they going to kind of a session with you to figure that stuff out, or are you just making sure that they're staying on track?
So I have a process. So first of all, there's an appointment order, and it's got at least in North Carolina where I am, and it's got a bunch of check boxes that sets forth the areas of my authority. So like I just mentioned, education could be one of those. And if I've been appointed as the parenting coordinator, one of the first things I do is I have an intake meeting with both folks, but separately. They each get to meet with me separately, and I just hear from each of them, tell me about your family, tell me about what issues you see are on the horizon and how I can help. And so later on down the road, dad or mom might come to me and say, hey, Jamie, we can't agree on where our son should go to school. We need help. And so then dad gives me his position, mom gives me her position, and then I decide what the school is where the child would go in that case.
Oh, interesting. So you actually get to decide what happens.
Yeah. So I tell folks that they're going to get very tired of having a third parent in their relationship. And if I am doing a good job, I say that I am working myself out of a job, because the goal is that the two of them hate my decisions so much that they start communicating well and make their own decisions.
Yeah. I bet you heard similar things about lawyers that that do trusts, right? Of they just try to be as stingy as possible, or kind of just as stonewall, so that they end up not having to disperse the money and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
It's not always possible, right? Some folks are high conflict and they're never going to get along. I can't fix that, but I can make sure that decisions are getting made timely, so the child is getting whatever he or she needs in a timely manner.
Yeah. And is that enforced by the law? Because you're a lawyer and you're appointed, is there teeth to that?
Yeah. So in North Carolina, if you're a parenting coordinator and you issue what's called a directive, which is the decision, it is binding just like a court order.
Wow. Okay. So the police could get involved if it's not respected?
Well, no, it's not criminal. It's civil.
Civil. Okay.
But what could happen is if one parent doesn't do what the directive is, the other parent's lawyer, or in some cases even me as the parent coordinator, I could ask the court to hold the person in contempt of court. And then the court can decide what sort of punishment the person should have for violating that order.
Great. Yeah. So hopefully you don't have to get to that point, but it does sound like there is ways to enforce some of these decisions, and it's up to you to make sure what's in the best interest of the child, it sounds like. Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. Man, that's wild. How big is your caseload? How many couples are you working with?
In terms of my divorce clients or my parent coordinator clients?
Parent coordinating. How many third parents are you, I guess?
I would say currently probably somewhere, I don't know the exact number, but I think between 15 and 20.
Okay. Yeah. That's a lot. That's a full-time job. It's a ton. Yeah. To be in the middle of that. Wow. Okay. So I guess as you went through the process, what were some tips and tricks as far as prevention? Say a little bit about, prenups or other ways that you can, mitigate this process ahead of time.
Yeah. So I think there is a misconception that folks think prenups are just for rich people, and they're not. Prenups can be really good, especially for folks who are beginning a second marriage. Maybe they already have children. In the prenup, you can go ahead and define what's going to be a person's separate property and what's going to be marital property that's subject to be divided if the folks separate. You can also waive inheritance rights so that either one of you are free to leave whatever you want to whoever you want in your will, like including your spouse. You can certainly provide for them in your will as well. But you're waiving those rights to contest that so that if you have children from a prior marriage and you want to leave your estate to them, you can do that without worrying that your new spouse might contest it. You can also set forth terms for alimony or waiving alimony. And so really what you're doing is in this contract that you enter into before you get married, you're setting forth what the rules of your separation are going to be.
Yeah. One thing that I didn't know and I would want to confirm with you is that like you can update your prenup whenever, right? It's just like a marital agreement. So do you recommend people, kind of come back to the drawing board every, 5 years or something to keep it up to date?
I think it depends on what it says and if it's still meeting the needs of the couple. In North Carolina, you can only waive alimony during a period of separation. So in a premarital agreement, you can waive alimony. But then after you get married, if you don't have an agreement and you want to enter, we call it a postnup. If folks are still staying together, but they still want an agreement for dividing their property, you just can't include that alimony waiver at that point. But yeah, you can update stuff, you can amend it, you can change it, you can get rid of it, you can do whatever you want with it.
Yeah, I mean, I recently got married and we got one too, and our lawyer kind of showed it to us like it's like a vaccine. It's like you never want to use it, but like if you need to, it's good that it's there, and it'll make the divorce way more amicable if that does happen.
Well, and another cool provision you can include is that you can include an arbitration provision so that if there's ever any dispute over the prenup, you guys go ahead and agree that you're going to participate in arbitration, which is a private alternative dispute resolution method. And so your case is not going to end up in a courtroom. So at least you maintain some privacy that way too.
Yeah. And probably save some money as well, and having to pay all those legal fees and everything. Yeah. Okay. Any other like preventative things or things that people can do to keep their marriage together and have it not move to divorce?
So I think marriage counseling is a good thing for folks. I also think a certain amount of transparency is also good. We see a lot of problems for folks where the finances are completely separate and neither party has any insight into the finances of the other. I think that can, breed distrust and also make it easier for things to do things that they shouldn't be doing in their marriage. I think same with communication. When we have clients come in and we're trying to figure out if there's infidelity or not, we ask them questions like, well, is your spouse protective of their cell phone? Yes. Do they have a passcode on their cell phone? Yes. Do you know the passcode? No. If you asked to use your spouse's phone, what would they do? And if they're like, oh my God, they would like never let me use their phone. They're so protective. We're like, well, you might want to look into that because there may be something going on. So really just keeping your eyes open for things like that. And if you sense an issue, try to address it before it's too late.
Yeah, I think that's really smart, right? It's like, if you see something, say something kind of deal, it's like, yeah. I'd also add, especially around like substance use or drinking or smoking weed or whatever it is, like if that seems to be getting out of control, you want to hit that early and often because that can lead to those types of behaviors, right? It can lead to infidelity or abuse or, neglect or something like that. So trying to deal with it on a medical and, therapeutic level before it becomes a legal level.
Yeah, and I think too, like, let's say that, you're not able to prevent it and you find yourself at a place where you want to be separated and you just can't imagine being married to this person any longer. It doesn't have to be destructive. Like you really can be separated and you really can get a divorce without destroying your family relationships and your family finances. I mean, I try to remind people, especially with custody issues, that once you guys go to court and your lawyer, tears up the other side on cross-exam, it's going to be really hard to co-parent with that person. And even when your kids turn 18, you guys are still going to be co-parents and having to attend events together like graduations and weddings and births of grandchildren. And so think about that and think about how important that relationship is to you, just from your child's standpoint, right? Like you want to be able to sit in the same room with your child's co-parent when they're adults, and enjoy these moments with them.
Yeah, I think that framework really helps. Letting them like see a little bit further out into the future and not be focused on whatever like the current drama and crisis of the day is. Because I'm with you. I think the kids' mental well-being is by far the most important thing, and creating that stability and safety is critical.
Yeah, and from a financial standpoint, so we see this a lot. If a spouse has been unfaithful and they're getting separated, they feel very guilty. And as part of that, there is a tendency to want to give more to the other spouse than they're legally required to. And that's okay if that's what you really want to do, but you just need to remember that you're probably going to feel differently 2 years, 5 years from now, and that you just need to make sure that you are walking away with enough money and property to take care of yourself into the future as well, and that you don't have buyer's remorse later on.
Yeah. Say more about that, because I see that happen with some of the guys I work with. Is like the guilt is so overpowering that they just want to like give everything away, or they'll say like, what, I was a bad guy, I cheated, or I drank too much, or whatever, and like, she gets to take whatever she wants. But then, yeah, like you said, 2 or 3 years later, they realize, oh my God, I really gave up a lot. I gave up my home, and I gave up some custody rights, and I moved, to a different state, and I'm living with my family. How do you help people get more of that vantage point, or really like quantify it?
I mean, I think it's really important for folks to listen to their lawyers in those situations, because you are paying your lawyer for legal advice, and they are looking out for your best interest. They are your advocate. And so, again, try to put the emotion in a box when it comes to wrapping up the financial part of the case, and just really listen to that advice, because you're going to be really unhappy later if you don't, most likely.
Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you wanted to open up, but you were afraid that it wouldn't be taken well? You ask yourself, what's the point? Nothing's going to change anyway. So you do what you always do. You push it down, numb out the pain with a drink, a night out, or pornography. I've been there myself, and I know that men lack the outlets for emotional expression, which is why I founded Men's Therapy Online, a healing hub for men's mental health. If you've been knocked on your ass or just crave meaningful connection, join Men's Therapy Online, a community of men who just get it. We offer individual therapy, men's groups, and powerful retreats, all led by licensed therapists. At Men's Therapy Online, we will help you to get back on your feet and take your life to the next level. Start your journey today at menstherapy.online.
Yeah, it's a really good point, right? The lawyer is that kind of like emotional rock and could be that rational place, when you're not feeling that. I'm curious, do you or your firm do like estate planning or trust or anything like that?
No, we just do family law here. All family law.
Do you work with wealthy clients that have trust or have significant investments? Because I know that can be a place for high conflict too.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. Any special considerations for that population?
Really just making sure that you do your homework, and that the trust documents have been reviewed by your lawyer, and that you hire a lawyer with expertise in working with higher net worth families.
Yeah, because I think I can get like real messy, because it's like all the assets can be shared, and they're family assets now,
Well, and two, making sure the lawyer understands the assets that you have and whether or not they're actually transferable to the other spouse. You don't want to reach a separation agreement, painstakingly work through the terms of an agreement that says you're getting 50% of something, only to find out later that it's not transferable and it's not going to work, and you're going to have to figure out a different way to get your half of that asset.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think like inheritances are the same way, right? Like, at least in Colorado, like an inheritance is not a family asset unless it's otherwise stated. It's like left to the person that's left to. Right?
Yep, absolutely. Same here in North Carolina. It's the separate property of the person who received it, unless they do something with it that, for example, we have one nuance that if you take separate property and put it into a piece of real estate and title it jointly as tenancy by the entirety, you are presumed to have made a gift to the marriage.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. If you buy like a joint piece of property or a vehicle or something, right?
But yeah, if you keep it separate, like if it just goes in an account in your name, then that would be your separate property.
Yeah. How about retirement accounts? How do you litigate around those?
So for retirement, it's just like any other marital property here. We have equitable distribution. And so marital property is anything acquired by either spouse from the day they got married until the day they eventually separate. And that also includes retirement. So each spouse would be entitled to 50% of the marital retirement, and that's accomplished by what's called a qualified domestic relations order. That's basically just a court order that authorizes the retirement plan to roll whatever percentage of the retirement into an account in the other spouse's name.
Okay. So it would move over as considered marital property if it's after the marriage. Yeah.
Yes.
Another question I have is alimony. Because I have a lot of clients that are business owners, right? And like their income is very fluid, or maybe they keep their income low, to have a tax benefit. Like how's that all calculated?
So in North Carolina, strangely enough, there is no formula for calculating alimony.
Oh, okay.
One way that we try to go about figuring out what it should be. So one way we try to go about calculating it is we look at the budget of the dependent spouse, who's the person who would be receiving alimony. And so let's say that she needs $5,000 a month to pay her bills. And let's say she brings home $1,000 from a part-time job. And let's say that dad is paying her another $1,000 in child support. So she's got a $3,000 deficit in her monthly budget. That's what she would need from her husband in alimony. And then we look at his finances and we say, okay, if he pays his bills from his income, does he have enough money left to still then pay her child support and alimony in that amount? And if the answer is yes, great, that's probably the right number. A lot of times the answer is no. And so then we have to do a little negotiating and figure out what that sweet spot is. It can be difficult to calculate the income of a spouse who is self-employed. So for business owners, it's a little bit trickier and can require a little more analysis of the financial documents, but it can be done.
Okay. And does alimony get renegotiated? Like say in this, in your case study, like if the female spouse like goes and gets a job, right, and now she's making more money, right, or gets a raise or something, does it get recalculated or does it stay around that $3,000 number?
So it depends. Alimony is modifiable based upon a substantial change of circumstances if it's in a court order. If it's as part of a contract, it's typically not modifiable and you'd be stuck with that amount. Okay.
So it's very important to get that calculation right off the bat because that could be something that stays for a while.
Yeah, absolutely.
And is alimony is that forever or is it how long does that go for?
So we don't have a hard and fast rule here in North Carolina, but a rule of thumb that family lawyers often talk about is around half the length of the marriage is typical.
It's typical. Okay. Yeah. And I imagine child support is until the kid's 18. Is that fair?
Yep. We have one little nuance. It's until the child has turned 18 and has graduated from high school, whichever occurs later.
Okay. Yeah. So if the kid's held back or something and needs to do more schooling, then they get an extra year.
Let's say they have an early birthday and they're still in high school and they graduate at 17, that child support would go until they're 18.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, so there's still another year of payment. So you're not off the hook quite yet. still gotta do that. Okay. So tell me a little about the book. Like what's in the book and what inspired you to write it?
Yeah. So the book is A Year and a Day, Divorce Without Destruction. It was actually inspired by the first couple of seasons of the podcast. The information that had been shared with me by the guests on the show was so great. I really wanted to put it into a book to make it more accessible to more people as a resource. I'm really passionate about what I do. I think there really is a way that you can get through this potentially bad situation of a separation and divorce, but do it in a way that is the least destructive to you and your family. And so I just want to share that knowledge with as many people as I can.
Yeah, I think that's really important, right? Because the divorce rate, you probably know, is it still over 50%?
Yeah, I think it has gone down slightly, but I still think it's in that ballpark, and it's even higher for second and third marriages.
Yeah, so it's crazy of how common that is. So I think we need as many people like you out there, creating content, writing books, writing podcasts about how to make this happy and healthy and as best, like you said, make the best out of a bad situation. Because it seems over 50% is crazy, right? Because it's more often than not, the marriage is gonna end.
Yeah, potentially.
Yeah. Well, what do you think is the cause of that? We've been doing this for, decades. What trends or patterns do you see?
So one of the most noticeable patterns, I think, is the increase in gray divorce, and that's divorces among folks who are over 55. We're seeing a lot of those. I think there's a lot of different reasons for that. I think that more women are in the workforce and actually more women are initiating separations these days because they don't have to stay in marriages if they're not happy anymore from a financial standpoint. I also think an interesting trend, though, is that people are getting married later. And so they've already established their own lives, their own careers, and then they're choosing to get married, which I think sometimes doesn't always work just because they're, set in their ways and their patterns, and trying to, mesh that with someone else can be difficult.
Yeah, I see that I see both of it with my clients, right? I think with the gray divorces, a lot of people are like, keeping together for the kids, but the marriage has been dead or atrophied probably for, years ahead of time, but they just, finally at some point are doing it. I think it's great, right? I mean, like, the women they don't need men, and they can have higher standards, and like they can go off on their own, and they don't need, guys for survival in the same way that they needed before. And I see, also with those like millennials, my generation, right? We're getting married in our 30s. So oftentimes we're not like growing up together, which I think was common for earlier marriages, right? Where there was more bonding in a way.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, another reason for gray divorce is that people are living healthier for longer. And so you can still get divorced in your 50s and 60s and have a lot of years left to do something else.
Yeah. Yeah. You can still like date, you're not like infirm yet. You don't need someone to take care of you. Yeah. So there's kind of that like next phase of life. Any other tips or tricks you want to share as we're moving toward the end of the show here?
Really, I think it's just to take care of yourself as you go through this process. I can't stress self-care enough. Because if you do that, then you're going to be in the right frame of mind to make all those really important decisions that you need to make. And also, you want to put yourself in the best possible position for your next chapter. Yeah.
I'd echo that, right? Like, get a therapist, get a parent coordinator, like build your team, like you said, step number 2, because it is like, it's the worst part of many people's lives. It's that truly rock bottom moment. Well, Jamie, thank you so much for being on the show. I really enjoyed this conversation. Where can people learn more about you if they want to follow you online?
Yeah. So my website is divorcestough.com. And my podcast, A Year and a Day, Divorce Without Destruction, is available on Apple, Spotify, and wherever you listen to podcasts.
Fantastic. Yeah, we'll have all that stuff in the show notes. You can go ahead and click that. We've had some questions about where the show notes are. They are the description of the podcast. So whoever listening to this on, click, read more or more info, whatever it says, and you'll see all of Jamie's links there. Follow her podcast. Check out her website. There's a lot of really good content there, especially if you are in the midst of divorce or considering a divorce. It's great to talk to an expert, someone that has been through it, for decades and really knows what they're talking about. You're probably doing it your first, maybe your second time. So consulting with a lawyer and a parent coordinator is really helpful in that. So Jamie, thank you again for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. If you like this episode, do the social stuff, like, share, subscribe, you know what to do. Send it to somebody who might need to hear this message, someone that is, reeling, struggling, lost in the divorce process. I think speaking with someone like Jamie can be really, really helpful for them to get stable and to get grounded. So thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week on the episode of a Men's Therapy Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review. And don't forget to visit menstherapy.online to learn more about the work that we are doing to support and inspire men. Until next time, keep moving forward.